best recommendation I give to business owners in launching a new business, running a business, and just continuing to execute as you grow is purpose and execution. What's your purpose, and execute upon it.
Hey everybody, welcome to this week's edition of In the Den. I have Josh Skolnick with me, who's not just sold one company, but two companies to private equity firms for life-changing money, and he owns other firms. He's a good friend of mine. I'm happy to have him here in the Den. I've known Josh for probably almost 10 years now. Josh, so thankful for you coming into the Den. How you doing, bud?
Doing well. Thanks for having me.
So let's just jump right into it. Like, you're a local guy here at Bucks County, Philadelphia.
Yep.
You know, I know you well. You had Y Monster. We were doing your digital marketing. We were helping you grow. Now you own an agency, which I'm proud of too, because I think everyone should own an agency if you're in multiple businesses. Besides the point, we talk about that. But let's talk about this. You take Y Monster. It was your baby. You loved it. I mean, I knew you when you were living up in that house at, was it York Road and County Line right there, that area, right in the corner there? And like back then, we thought you made it. Like that was like the up here. Now you sell Y Monster to private equity for, I'm not going to disclose the amount, but tons of money. Yep. Can you talk about that process and building that company? Because a lot of people just think you went from, probably you were a private equity fund baby. You're not. You're a self-made guy.
Yeah, I think where you and I get along so well is our backgrounds. We both came from nothing. And like I always say, my parents weren't able to give me material items, but they were able to teach me a strong work ethic, and that's all I needed to get through life. But my entrepreneurial journey really began when I was 9 years old, push mowing lawns in a local neighborhood where I grew up, actually in Montgomery County, Pennsylvania, Fort Washington, and continued to build that up over the years. Ultimately got out of it to focus on some real estate, got back into the green industry through tree care. But one of the things that a lot of people think is like, well, the tree industry was easy for you because you were in the lawn care industry. But lawn care is really eye level down, tree care is really eye level up. So I really, in 2008, when I got into tree care, had to learn it all. I knew nothing about the industry. I actually tried to partner with a couple guys that knew the industry that, turned me down. They were like, hey, you're wet behind the ears. You don't know what you're doing. Like, you're never going to be successful. Like, who do you think you are coming to an industry that you don't even, you never climb trees. You don't know how to identify trees or anything of that nature. And I tell you, there's a couple people that really regret those decisions.
Oh, I know they do.
And so, as a business, I just started in 2008. And by the time I grew it to about $5 million in revenue, I was looking at, what's the next opportunity? Do I continue to grow corporately? And someone mentioned franchising, and I looked down the franchise path, and that's what I chose to do. And truthfully, I got my teeth kicked in for about 4 to 5 years, and quickly awarded 28 locations, had to pause development for a time period, invest a couple $1 million to really get those franchisees on track and successful, build the proper infrastructure, and then restart the engine, and it was off to the races to about 240 locations.
I mean, and this is what people don't realize, when you made that decision, because you might be positive cash flow, but to scale like that, you're taking debt. So you're not sleeping good at night some of those nights, and you're dealing with every problem. Can you talk about that? Because a lot of people, I'm in the process of buying a company we just talked about, I'm not going to say every now and she said to me, well, I have no debt. I said, well, that's not great. I used to always brag about that. Like, to really scale, you're going to have to take some debt and take some risk. Can you talk about that?
Well, that's the hardest thing for any business owner is like we're raised on a personal level that you need to pay down debt. But when it comes to business, if you look around, just the wealthiest people you see in the media every day, just take a guy like Warren Buffett. They've made their living with other people's money. They've got plenty of cash on their own balance sheets, but they still leverage other people's money. And so in business, like I never forget my mom coming to me at one point and being like, hey, I'm worried about you. Like she goes, I overheard you, telling your father you have over $1 million in loans on equipment. And, I wasn't even 18 months into business. And I had, I'm in a tree care business, not even 18 months, and I've got millions of dollars in debt racking up on all this equipment. But what they don't realize is the money that's being generated and the revenues that are being created. And, even though I owned 100% of it, I was fortunate that I was able to leverage my own balance sheet and the cash flow of the business to truly grow and scale it, to borrow money from financial institutions and not have to give away equity in those businesses over the years.
Now, you sell Y Monster.
Yes.
And that gave you generational wealth. I know. Then you come right back and you start a dumpster company, Redbox. Talk about that.
Yeah, so if you go back in 2017, 2018, you would have heard me talk about Monster Tree Service being my baby, just as you said earlier. And I never envisioned selling it. But then when the pandemic hit and I built such a great business, I was the only tree care business in franchising, I started getting approached by private equity. I had an investment banker that was, on my doorstep for over a year going, when will you let me bring you offers? Like, I've got people that are ready to write the check. I was fortunate to sell it in a very sizable transaction, 9-figure transaction that ultimately, created a really launching path for me to go to do whatever I wanted to do. But before I even got there, in June of 18, I ended up acquiring a company with 4 locations called Redbox Plus. It is a patented product. I acquired the patents to put porta potties in front of construction dumpsters, and it seemed pretty easy, but it was actually a pretty difficult business to run because I had to establish manufacturing, and I grew that business from 4 locations to 305 in 3 years. And then I ultimately exited that one too, and I sold that to Belfour, the world's largest restoration company.
Which was my client at one time.
Yeah.
Yeah. People don't realize that they're international.
Yeah,
they are. And they're right here in Chester County. They're still there?
Yeah. They're down in Chester County is one of their main headquarters, and then out in Ann Arbor, Michigan, and they're in like 57 countries.
So now, here you go, right? You sell these 2 companies. You're very wealthy. You don't have to work at this point. You have why now you own. We talked about it. We both own roofing companies. We both own agencies now. You came into the agency business, which I love the fact that you did, right? You own a car dealership, correct?
Correct.
What else do you own?
So I've got about 15 companies under an umbrella called Horsepower Brands. And so the premise of that is I've got 8 franchise brands, and then I've got vendors that support it. So we've got a digital marketing agency. We've got a dealership to facilitate all of the acquisitions of vehicles, extended warranty, service plans, financing, everything that you would get from any dealership, we're doing internally for our franchisees. We've got a recruiting agency. We've got a call center. We've got a bookkeeping company, a technology company. The list just keeps going. Anything franchisees need as part of a franchisee in a franchise system, we remove the triangular relationship of vendors, and we create accountability by being able to sit across the table from our franchisees and make sure that we can perform.
And you're the expert in it because you've done it now. You've sold to. So for someone not to listen to you would be kind of foolish. And people don't realize what a small world is. And why I always say this is, you walk through the door here, I'm like, yo, Josh, what's going on? I'm not going to say the guy's name. And you just had lunch with him, and he just calls me for digital marketing, but we both know the same guy. And it's like, people don't understand. The world is very small. Make sure you do right by people. Yeah. And you know what you're doing. And some people would say you might not be an expert in franchise, but who would be a bigger expert than you at this point? I'm not labeling you, but I'm in and out of conferences all the time. I've never met someone done what you've done in franchisee from the ground up, literally from the ground up.
Yeah, I think one of the advantages I have is I'm a very humble guy, so I don't go around basically talking about the level of experience I have to everybody or puffing my chest out saying I'm the foremost expert in the industry.
You are, though.
I try to share. I try to remain humble. I share as much as I can with other people. Like the lunch I had today with a mutual acquaintance was literally, he reached out to me 2 weeks ago and said, hey, I have some questions. Could I have 5 minutes of your time to pick your brain? And I said, better than that, let's meet for lunch on this date today. And we met for lunch. I sat down with him for 2 hours, and he's like, man, I can't believe you give me this much time. And it comes back to one of the things you asked a little while ago, like, why do I do what I do? And it's really not for the money. It's, not only do I have an 8, 10, and 11-year-old, children at home between my 3 kids, but I also have to show them, set a good example by getting up every day and going to work, making sure that they're going to be a betterment to society. But at the end of the day, for me, it's about having an impact for others and helping other people realize some things that they may not have been able to achieve on their own. So to have lunch with someone and help guide them down the path to be very successful in an industry that I've learned so much, like I just want to give back as much as I can to those. Because I've got the team behind me at Horsepower Brands that's running the business. I'm a visionary. And so I'm a visionary that's surrounded myself probably just like yourself with integrators that know how to get the work done. We lead the vision, and then what ultimately happens is we can continue to network, and when we do the right thing, the wealth follows.
100%.
And that's exactly what I'm doing.
Here's a question for you. Like me, people always say, how do you run all these companies, right? I own 6 different companies. We're going to do over $100 million in revenue this year. I know you're going to do well more than that in revenue this year. I have partners in every business besides one SEO. You told me earlier today you have partners. The partners really run the business. People don't understand that. Like you said, you're the visionary. You're just the person setting the table, and everybody else is eating.
Yep.
I mean, can you explain that and why it's so successful? I don't think many people get that.
So I struggled for years with wanting to own 100% of everything. And then when I got my first taste of a partnership in Redbox Plus, when I acquired that, the founder remained involved in a minority position. And really his vision was, he's like, listen, I'm a worker. I just want to work. Like, let me manage the fleet side, the manufacturing of the dumpsters. You run the franchise business. You get them awarded across the country, and I'll make sure they get their equipment. It's set up. It's delivered on time. Any equipment issues, I'll run it. And it was so refreshing to know that I could really focus in the sandbox that I was really good at in running a business, in growing a franchise. And so as I've continued to grow, every partnership I get involved in, the founder has to be someone who not only can I sit across the table from and really consider a friend that I can trust, but also someone I can trust more to run the business and make sure they're going to do the right thing. Because I don't have the capacity, nor do you, to get in the trenches and run these entities, soup to nuts every day of the week.
So let's talk about this also, because people don't realize you stood up laughing. I told you what my roofing company did, and you're like, well, you know how to make the phone ring. You know how to get leads.
Yeah.
Let's talk about marketing and
Yes.
why it's so important, right? When you were at Y Monster, I did your marketing for years. Let's just talk about why digital marketing is a springboard. And I'm not being rude. Like I take billboards out here and there, but digital marketing is going to bring in 80% of your leads, if not more, right?
Correct.
Talk about why digital marketing is so important. And a lot of people here don't do digital marketing still watching this show. They're petrified to do it.
Yeah, well, if you remember back when you and I first met, I didn't even have a website. So I was running a multi-million-dollar tree care business local here in Eastern Pennsylvania. I didn't even have a website.
Okay,
I was at the point that I was starting to sell franchises, and even franchisees were like, "Wait, you don't have a website?" I'm like, we don't need it. We get so many referrals. We've got so many ways to get work. And then it really took our business to the next level, because I remember meeting you, and if you remember the first time we met, I showed up in jeans and a safety green T-shirt, and I brought one of my business development guys with me, and he's in a suit, like nice shirt, and you're kind of talking to him, and I will never forget when you almost thought he was the brains of the operation. I was just a worker, but then we put the pieces together, and it all made sense, and we created a partnership together, let you manage it, and we were able to really catapult the volume of our business. And so today I always talk to any person is considering business and getting involved in any level of marketing to really secure that virtual real estate online. Because as you know in your business, and I'm learning more and more as I have my agency, is that it's not just about the work you put in today. It's truly about when you start, because it takes history and it takes impressions, and it really takes time to build that time. And sometimes people are waiting for the right time. And it's like the people that fall into what I always talk about is that shoulda, coulda, woulda category in life and a lot of things, and that they're thinking about it. Well, they need to stop thinking about it and execute. Comes back to some of the core values I focus on: purpose and execution. And so I always talk about, like, it's better to execute on a bad idea than it is to not execute at all. And so even though it can be intimidating to think about, hey, I don't understand a digital landscape, but they're going to trust in a partner like you, Lance, at One SEO, and turn around and start investing money, whether it be $1,000 a month, $5,000 a month, $10,000 a month. I remember our first meeting, some of the money you shared with me, clients were spending. I walked out of the meeting going, holy shit, that's a good problem to have if I got to spend tens of thousands of dollars a month in marketing, because it's not a charity. It's working, and it's to grow a business, and that's exactly how you're growing your businesses.
Well, that's exactly it, and that's how you're growing yours. Yeah. But what I love about your thing with marketing is not just are you doing marketing now. You said, okay, and honestly, I'm going to duplicate it. Don't take it wrong. I love Horsepower Brands. I told this to CJ. I know she was just at your place, and she told me it's beautiful. But you have a 360 approach. No matter what you need for franchisees, you're taking care of them. You're almost like, Tommy Mello is from Vertical Track, my buddy.
Yep.
You're almost doing what he's doing and what Nexstar is doing. You're saying, hey, listen, you guys have a problem here, not just a digital marketing problem, not just a systems problem. You're getting them vehicle problems. So you went and bought a dealership, so now you can supply them. You went out and said, okay, you guys have an accounting problem, which we know what the book's like for 90% of these people. Not being rude, but we bought enough companies now, you get a P&L and you're like, what is this piece of shit you're giving me? But
it's not worth as much as the paper it's written on.
No. So you literally are... Can you talk about being a full shop stop? Because I don't think you're really explaining it. I want you to explain, like, there's nothing that you don't do now for a franchisee that you cannot help them grow their business.
Yeah. So I'm a problem solver. Anyone that's known me for years knows that if they've interacted with me in business and they've been on the vendor side of the table, that I'm a solution-oriented individual. So it's like, if there's a problem, I'm going to find a solution, and I'll stop at nothing to get there. And whatever amount of money it takes to get beyond that hurdle, I'm going to invest it, because I believe I'm betting on the jockey myself. And so when I look at the, sort of ecosystem that I'm creating within franchising, every one of my franchisees needs several vendors in order to run their business. They're going to have to go hire people, and in today's climate with hiring, they're not going to be able to complete it on their own, so they might hire a recruiting agency. Well, why shouldn't I offer that service? It removes that triangular relationship of franchisor, franchisee, and the vendor never wants to take accountability. And then more importantly, we can create more accountability through all of these vendors within this ecosystem, from digital marketing to the dealership, to the accounting, to the technology, to the recruiting, and just get out there, and we know the business. We're in it every day. We know what their challenges are, and just sit across the table and find solutions to the problems and what we need. More importantly too, Lance, the franchisees in our business model are going to go pay somebody else to do it. So why go pay someone else who's not going to invest the profits that they're generating into improving the service? They're going to go buy planes, fancy cars, nice vacations. No, we're investing back into the performance, because at the end of the day, for me, what this ecosystem creates is it comes back to the primary focus of income we have as a franchisor is the royalty streams that we create.
Oh, 100%.
That's ultimately what I'm looking to create. Is I want your business to increase its revenue. You'll pay me more royalties, and you'll be much happier with the investment that I promise to get you two things: a return on your investment and a return on your time. And I'll give you both of those.
So let's talk about that, because as you know, I own no franchisees. It's just, I think some people are meant to own a franchisee. I think some people aren't, depending who it is, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's all, I've met multi-millionaires that own 20, 30 different franchisees, or 20 of the same, and they do very well. Systems are in place. They probably wouldn't have been a millionaire without the franchisor. And makes sense?
Yes, it does.
And then there's just a guy like me that says, okay, I'm just going to keep letting it rip and keep failing. I don't know why I didn't buy a franchise yet. But can you tell people why so many people buy franchisees? Because I don't think people understand why people go and buy a Y monster. Well, why don't you start your own tree company? Why don't you just go get your own dumpster company? Why don't you just... It's not that simple. Can you explain why?
Yeah, so every franchisee that comes into any business that I have as a franchisor, we openly share up front that you're capable to go do this on your own. You don't need us. But here's the difference, is that we're going to put you in a business where you need to focus on two things that are going to make you money: sales and production. And you know, in your service businesses, that's how you make money: sales and production.
That's all it is.
But an average business owner, when they want to go, well, what's the name of my business going to be? Who's my website provider going to be? Who am I going to buy my vehicles from? How am I going to build my vehicles? And everything else that a business owner has to wear, we're literally removing dozens of hats so that you're investing and you're paying us a portion of your income based on the royalties you pay to us. But we're putting you on a path to success. We open franchisees into a marketplace with an image like they've been there for the last decade. They're well capitalized, they're starting with brand new equipment, they're starting with world-class marketing, they're starting with a robust playbook of training and support where we dot all the I's and cross the T's, so that when a franchisee launches, they know little to nothing about the industry that they got into, but they're truly managing a business from an investment mindset the way you and I do. And so what they're doing is they're able to invest their money, and the cash-on-cash returns are through the roof.
Absolutely.
Because I always say, and you could probably agree with me on this, Lance, I've invested in all kinds of things in my life. A lot of the mainstream things that people are accustomed to, private equity investments, you name it. I own trailer parks. Like, it's amazing when you look at my balance sheet and the things that I've invested in. There's one thing that's always given me the best IRR to date, and I've been investing at 39 years old. I've been investing for over 27 years. Opened my first investment account March 15th, 1996. I was 12 years old. And it's my own businesses. My own businesses have always given me the best return. I've got great passive investments, and I need them to balance my portfolio. But at the end of the day, I'm always going to bet on myself. And I think that that's what I do a great job of educating others on doing with their own money.
You're 100% correct. My best investments have been all my businesses, but I think we're drivers if you get that. I mean, like, I own a ton of real estate, as you know, and stuff like that, but
yeah,
you're right. It's passive. It's really just almost like safeguarding your net worth by owning those things. But the business is what gives you your heavy cash flow. It just generates revenue after revenue after revenue. I think the reason I like franchisees, and I tell this, like my son, Andrew, I would tell him to go buy a franchise because it would make sense for him. The systems are there, like you said, the processes. I always said this about Roto-Rooter. People are like, why would you go buy a Roto-Rooter? Now, I'm not a Roto-Rooter fan. I'm not a fan.
Yeah.
Well, you don't got to be a plumber to own a Roto-Rooter.
Right.
They're going to give you you never, I own a roofing company. I've never once sold a shingle. I own a painting company. Never once sold. That's not what we do. So
I was on a roof this summer and I was scared to death. It was the first time I ever got on a roof, and I'm never doing it again.
Yeah, so you get it. That's where I think people don't understand what a guy like you and your system brings to play. You're going to take an average person that probably owns his business, that'd be what I call a chuck in a truck, and you're going to make him into a millionaire. He's never going to punch, or she's never going to punch through the ceiling of owning a franchise like you will give them. And average franchise probably generates between $1 and $5 million. Ballpark, would you say?
Average volume, it varies between each one of the brands that we have, but they're all over the place. But we typically look for average at least of $1 million average unit volume.
High end would be $5 million for the most part, right? So if you just look at a net 20%, that's a nice living for someone.
Sure is.
And they don't have to worry about HR issues, systems, processes, what CRM they're going to use, what accounting system they're going to use.
Yeah.
That's where I think the payoff is.
The big thing we do, Lance, is we work with a lot of people that have never been in business for themselves. So, just imagine how the cards are stacked up against someone that's been a W-2 employee their whole life, and all of a sudden has a midlife crisis and goes, I've always wanted to own a business. And then they go, you know what, I got $500,000 in my 401k. I got another couple $100,000 in equity in my house. That should be enough of a buffer for me to go start a business. And when they do it on their own, they don't realize all the hurdles they're going to have to get over, where franchising really takes what could take 10 years and condenses it to something they can complete in the next 2 to 3 years.
100%.
And it's really gets you to profitability very quickly without having to do a lot of testing and measuring. There's no R&D. The R&D is done.
So let's talk about this, the stress level that you have to be at times, right? Because I don't care what anyone says. If you sold 2 companies, I've sold now 1 company. I'm actually in the process of buying another company. Mm-hmm. People don't understand the stress. How do you manage the stress? Because let's just talk about that, the stress to people. So many people don't handle the stress well. How do you handle the stress?
So truthfully, I sum it up into one word. It's transparency. So I'm very transparent with people. So I don't hold anything in. I use another word called carefrontational. And so some people may view them as a confrontational conversation. I view it as a carefrontational because it can be confrontational, but it's enough to show that I care about you. So if I've got a problem with somebody, I'm not going to hold it in and let it really weigh on me heavily. I'm going to just get it out in the air, and we're going to find the solution to the problem. But really for me, my outlet to, I look back to why do we do what we do? Not only are we animals that can't be caged, and we just have to be part of the art of the deal and just out there just seeking opportunities and making stuff happen, providing opportunities for the hundreds of people that work for us. But it's more so about, our families. When I come home at the end of the day, to my wife and my 3 kids, that makes it all worth it.
Oh, yeah.
I look back to everything I've done, those, 24-hour marathon days I've pulled in the past, because it was I had to be the guy to fill in when someone didn't show up, or, somebody called out, or somebody quit, or whatever it might be. It's when you see that the appreciation on your family's face at the end of the day, you're like, that makes it all worth it.
I know you got to go. I don't want to hold you up too long. What's your greatest achievement outside of work, would you say?
I'd say the greatest achievement for me, so I'm actually an Eagle Scout. A lot of people don't know that about me. I was heavily involved in Boy Scouts as a child, completed my Eagle Scout at an early age. But my wife and I do a lot outside of business. We're very philanthropic in being able to do things for our local community. But my wife and I are 2 people that I talked earlier about being humble. We don't need a thank you or a pat on the back for the things that we do. We do all of our philanthropic work anonymously. We don't like our name attached to any of it. And so I would believe, as I tell everyone, listen, when someone asks me, why do I keep working? It's because my wife and I were in the same boat, but we're rowing in different directions. I'm building wealth. She's busy giving it away. Okay. And so it's a good balance, but I would say that's a great accomplishment outside of work.
Let's talk a few more questions here real fast. What's next for horsepower brands? What's next for horsepower brands? What is next, and what's the next thing you get into?
So Horsepower Brands today has 15 companies in its umbrella. Our vision is 25 brands by 2025. Really, the idea when we get to that 25 by 25, there's logically 3 paths we can go. We can grow and hold, we could seek a private equity investment, but something that's really interesting to me is going public and looking at what the opportunity is to remain involved, take some chips off the table, and be able to continue to grow through a public offering. But we know that we have the ability, we have the foundation built to grow way beyond 25. Beyond that, outside of franchising, I haven't put a whole lot of thought, Lance, into like what else I want to do outside of franchising, because this is really where my focus is. I do have a lot of people that come to me and say, as many probably do to you, that everything you touch turns to gold. How do I get involved with what you're doing?
Well, that's not true for either one of us. We've had our losses.
We've had our losses, but for what everyone else has seen has turned to gold. And so at the end of the day, one of the things that I have really given a lot of thought to is starting a family office of some capacity with a great foundation of individuals who we can help individuals build wealth. We can take families that already have wealth and help them preserve that. I'm a firm believer, focus creates wealth, but diversification preserves it. And so really helping people to diversify their investment stream.
You know, I've known you a long time. You haven't changed. You're down to earth. You're humble. How do you keep it that way? Because a lot of people would be jerks. Like I said, yo, Josh, I get you on a den by text. You responded right back. It'd be an honor. Let me tell my story.
Yeah.
Like, how do you keep it so humble, so easy?
I think it's where you come from. And, you know, because I didn't come from anything. I talked about my parents, and it's probably wrong to say I didn't come from anything, because I came from a lot. My parents put a roof over my head, clothes on my back, food on my table, and taught me a strong work ethic. But they couldn't buy me material things, and I had no desire to have material things. And so I just went through life having to do for myself, and so I still think today, like today, my wife, I got a letter from an investment. We've got a substantial 8-figure investment into a company, and we got the notification this morning that the company's been sold, and the transaction will close by mid-November. And so my wife was all excited. She's like, "Congratulations! Like, is there anything you want to buy for yourself?" I'm like, "Nothing. I'm fine." Like, you know what I want to focus on is how do we take that capital and invest it in the next thing? How do we do something that can impact others? And so it's like when my kids approach me, you know, I had an opportunity to spend some time with Shaquille O'Neal earlier this year out in California. We were at a mutual event together, and you know, he always talks about, you know, like when his kids come to us and say, "Dad, are we rich?" He goes, No. I'm rich. You're not.
Correct.
You know, you got to build your own wealth. And I speak to my kids about that, you know, and that, I think that in our scenario is the hardest thing is how do we keep our kids grounded? Like we have it, we know because of coming from nothing, but our kids are growing up in a completely different world than what we grew up in. Absent of the technology, just the wealth that's been created, the trips, the experiences, the opportunities that are given to them. And I just hope they grab the bull by the horns and take the same type of opportunities I did.
I hope they do too. Last question for you before the final roar. What would you say if I was interviewing, because there's a lot of different places I go buy a franchise from, right? There's a lot. What would you say to somebody looking to get into the franchise business? What should be the most important things they're looking at? Because I don't even truthfully know what I should be looking at if I was going to go into a franchise. So can you kind of educate me real fast? What should I be looking for?
Yeah, so we have a saying at Horsepower Brands that every single business we have that a franchisee can buy is the widget to get them to their why. And so put the business aside, because too many people make mistakes because they get into business in something that they're passionate about. So if I was passionate about like riding bikes on the weekend, I'm not open and honest, but if I was passionate about riding bikes on the weekend, it would be a horrible idea for me to go buy a bike shop.
100%.
Or for me to try to get into that industry in some capacity, because I'm going to grow to hate my passion. But so we look at it as the widget to get you to your why. So when you go, just remove all of that. Look at the experience of the franchisor and really trust your gut. Because I often say to people, like, I know little to nothing about the industries that I'm in. But I've got experts that work in each one of those businesses, from operations to marketing to sales to just everything that you need to do to be successful, that they're running those divisions of the business. What we really focus in on is the fact that we want you to get into a business that you're going to get that return. But we always say we're franchisors, and people go, "No shit, so is every other franchisor I'm talking about." They're not, because the average franchisor is someone that, look at me when I had Monster Tree Service. I learned a lot about the tree care industry And when I got into franchising, I got my teeth kicked in because I was not a franchisor. I knew nothing about it. Right. Where with the acquisition strategy that I have today at Horsepower Brands, we find industries that are fragmented in service-based businesses that are needed by all across North America, and future, down the road, we'll do international. But today, there's services that are needed by all that what we can do is we can go out and make an impact across the country. And when you get involved with us, you know that we know what it takes to be a franchisor to make you successful. We have, in some of the businesses, Redbox Plus had a 100% success rate. 0 failures of 305 franchise units awarded in 3 years. That's unheard of in franchising.
No doubt.
And so that's what it's really about. It's like find someone who gets franchising, put the business aside, and then trust your gut and move forward.
You heard it from Josh Skolnick. The man, the myth, the legend, local to Bucks County, grew up in Montgomery County, and he's done more in 39 years than most do in a lifetime. Congratulations on all your success, brother. It's impressive.
Thank you.